In a busy high school hallway in Columbus, Ohio, what seemed like an ordinary day would become a powerful lesson about character, resilience, and the danger of quick judgments. If you're watching this video right now, comment where you're watching from, because this story about Usha Vance is one that needs to be heard around the world. The autumn morning started like any other at Wellington Academy, where the marble floors gleamed under soft lighting and designer backpacks lined the hallways. Among the students rushing to their next classes, Madison Spears and Christine Thomas stood by their lockers, their perfectly coordinated outfits reflecting the latest trends. But their attention wasn't on their upcoming calculus test or the weekend's football game. It was fixed on someone walking down the hallway. Usha Vance moved through the corridor with quiet confidence, carrying her worn backpack and wearing an outfit that stood out for its simplicity. Her father's old sweater, carefully mended at the elbows, hung loosely over a modest skirt she had owned since freshman year. While other students flaunted designer labels, Usha wore clothes that spoke of practicality and purpose rather than fashion. "Oh, God," Madison whispered to Christine, loud enough for others to hear. "Did she seriously wear that again? It's like she doesn't even try." The whispers grew into poorly concealed laughter as more students gathered around their lockers, creating an audience for what was about to unfold. Christine joined in, her voice carrying through the hallway. "I mean, doesn't her family have any money? My mom says they live in that big house, but she dresses like she shops at a thrift store." The cruel comments echoed off the walls as other students began to take notice, some uncomfortably shifting their weight while others joined in the laughter. What Madison and Christine didn't understand was that Usha's choices weren't about lacking options, they were about having different priorities. Her father had taught her that true worth wasn't found in designer labels or trending styles, but in character and actions. The sweater they mocked was a reminder of countless evening discussions about public service, responsibility, and the importance of staying grounded. As the laughter grew louder, Usha stopped walking. The hallway fell silent as she slowly turned to face her critics. There was no anger in her expression, no trace of embarrassment or shame. Instead, her eyes held a quiet determination that made several students step back involuntarily. "You know," Usha began, her voice clear and steady, "my father always says that the clothes we wear tell a story. This sweater? It belonged to him when he was working his way through law school, studying late into the night so he could serve our community. This skirt? I bought it with money I earned tutoring younger students in math and science." The silence in the hallway deepened as Usha continued. "While you're laughing about my clothes, I'm helping run a food drive that will feed 50 families this winter. While you're judging my outfit, I'm organizing a literacy program for elementary school students. So yes, I could wear different clothes, but I choose to spend my time and resources on things that actually matter." Madison's face flushed red as several students nodded in agreement with Usha's words. Christine looked down at her expensive shoes, suddenly feeling less proud of them. The crowd that had gathered to witness their mockery was now watching them shrink under the weight of Usha's quiet dignity. But Usha wasn't finished. "And since you mentioned my family's house," she added, looking directly at Christine, "yes, we do live there. And every Sunday, we open it up to host community meetings where people come together to solve real problems in our neighborhood. My clothes might not be new, but they're clean, they're decent, and they let me focus on work that matters." The impact of her words was immediate and profound. Students who had been laughing moments before now looked ashamed. Several of them stepped away from Madison and Christine, physically distancing themselves from the bullying they had witnessed or participated in. Victoria Horton, a senior who had been watching silently, spoke up. "She's right, you know. Usha helped my little sister improve her reading scores last semester. She spent hours working with her, never asking for anything in return." Others began sharing similar stories of Usha's volunteer work, her academic achievements, her quiet leadership in various school initiatives. The transformation in the hallway was remarkable. What had started as a moment of cruel mockery had become a powerful lesson about judgment, values, and true character. Madison and Christine stood silent, their expensive outfits suddenly feeling less like armor and more like evidence of their misplaced priorities. Usha adjusted her backpack and turned to continue walking to class, but not before leaving her audience with one final thought. My father taught me that how you treat others says more about you than any outfit ever could. I hope you'll think about that the next time you're tempted to judge someone based on what they're wearing. As she walked away, the hallway remained silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge to everyone present. Students who had never given much thought to their own values found themselves questioning their priorities. The incident would be talked about for weeks to come, not because of the initial mockery, but because of how Usha had transformed a moment of potential humiliation into a lesson about dignity, purpose, and real value. This story spread beyond Wellington Academy's walls, reaching other schools and communities. It became a reminder that true character isn't found in the price tag of your clothes but in the impact of your actions. And for those watching this video right now, it raises an important question. What really matters to you? Is it the brand names you wear, or the difference you make in the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know about a time when someone judged you before knowing your story. Remember, it's not about what you wear, it's about who you are and what you do for others. The story of Usha Vance's response to mockery in the hallway of Wellington Academy didn't end with her walking away. What happened next would demonstrate how a single moment of dignity could transform an entire school community. By lunchtime, the morning's events had spread throughout Wellington Academy like wildfire. In the bustling cafeteria, where social hierarchies were usually as rigid as assigned seating, something unusual was taking place. Madison Spears and Christine Thomas sat at their usual table, but the usual crowd of admirers was notably absent. Instead, students were gravitating toward a corner table where Usha Vance sat with Sarah Morgan and Rachel Rodriguez, discussing plans for the upcoming community food drive. The whispers now were different from the morning's mocking tones. Students spoke in hushed, respectful voices about how Usha had handled the situation. Jennifer Henderson, a sophomore who had witnessed the morning's events, approached Usha's table with determination in her steps. "I was wondering," Jennifer began, her voice slightly trembling, "if I could help with the food drive you mentioned?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Usha's warm smile welcomed her to sit down. This simple interaction would become the first of many similar moments throughout the day. Meanwhile, in the school's administrative offices, Principal Michael Crawford was having a serious discussion with Madison and Christine. Unlike traditional disciplinary meetings, this one took an unexpected turn. "I'm not going to punish you," he explained, his voice firm but compassionate. "Instead, I want you to understand the impact of your actions and have a chance to make things right." The principal shared something that neither girl knew. Usha had come to his office earlier, not to complain about their behavior, but to suggest turning the incident into a learning opportunity. She had proposed organizing a school-wide initiative about conscious consumption and charitable giving, transforming a moment of conflict into a chance for community growth. Back in the hallways between classes, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Students who had never given much thought to their designer clothes began looking at them differently. Alexandra Howard, known for her extensive wardrobe, was overheard telling her friends about researching local charities that accepted clothing donations. During 7th period, in Ms. Michelle Edwards' advanced placement government class, the discussion naturally turned to civic responsibility and personal character. Without mentioning the morning's incident directly, Ms. Edwards guided her students through a thoughtful exploration of how individual choices impact community well-being. "Leadership," she explained, "often comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages." Several students glanced at Usha's empty seat. She was absent from this class because she was meeting with the student council about expanding the literacy program she'd mentioned earlier. After school, in the parking lot, an unexpected scene unfolded. Madison Spears approached Usha as she waited for her ride. The usual group of onlookers held their breath, expecting another confrontation. Instead, Madison spoke with uncharacteristic humility. "I've been thinking about what you said," Madison began, her designer backpack suddenly feeling heavy on her shoulders. "About choosing where to put our time and resources. I'd like to learn more about the literacy program you run." Usha's response exemplified the grace she had shown all day. "We're meeting tomorrow after school in the library. We could always use more tutors." The exchange was brief, but its significance wasn't lost on those watching. This wasn't just about resolving a conflict, it was about transformation. As the day drew to a close, the impact of Usha's morning response continued to ripple through the school community. Coach Thomas Gutierrez, overhearing students discussing the incident during basketball practice, decided to incorporate a lesson about character and teamwork into his training session. "Success isn't about what you have," he told his team, "it's about what you give. And sometimes the biggest victories happen off the court." His words resonated particularly with team captain Brandon Palmer, who had witnessed the morning's events and now found himself questioning his own previous judgments. In the school newspaper office, editor-in-chief Catherine Chen was already working on a feature story. Not about the incident itself, but about the various community service initiatives at Wellington Academy that often went unnoticed. She had realized, inspired by the day's events, that these stories needed to be told. The transformation wasn't limited to the school grounds. As students returned home and shared the day's events with their families, the conversation spread throughout the community. Parents began discussing materialism and values with their children. Local social media groups buzzed with discussions about community involvement and conscious consumption. That evening at the Vance household, Usha sat with her father in his study, surrounded by law books and family photos. She shared the day's events not with triumph or resentment, but with thoughtful reflection on how a challenging moment had opened doors for positive change. "You know, Dad," she said, fingering the worn sleeve of his old sweater, "I think today helped people understand what you've always taught me, that our worth isn't in what we wear, but in what we do for others." Her father, looking at his daughter with pride, responded with wisdom that would later be shared throughout the community. "Sometimes the most powerful response to unkindness is to show people a better way to be." The next morning at Wellington Academy, subtle but significant changes were already visible. The usual morning fashion comparisons were replaced by discussions about the upcoming food drive. Students who had never spoken to each other were connecting over shared interests in community service. Madison and Christine arrived at school wearing notably simpler outfits. It wasn't about copying Usha or rejecting style entirely, it was about making a conscious choice to shift their priorities. They had spent the evening researching local charitable organizations and had come to school with ideas to share. During morning announcements, Principal Crawford introduced a new monthly spotlight feature highlighting students' community service efforts. The first profile would feature not just Usha's initiatives, but also the growing number of students who were joining her in making a difference. In the guidance office, Counselor Rebecca Watson noticed an increase in students asking about volunteer opportunities and community engagement. "It's like they've suddenly realized there's more to high school than social status," she remarked to a colleague. The school's social dynamics were shifting in subtle but meaningful ways. Students who had previously been invisible because they didn't wear the right brands or follow the latest trends were being noticed for their achievements and contributions. The cafeteria seating arrangement began to blur as students grouped themselves around shared interests and initiatives rather than social status. Even the school's social media presence transformed. The usual posts about fashion and parties were increasingly interspersed with updates about community projects and student achievements. The official school Instagram account, managed by senior Dylan Stokes, began featuring daily spotlights on students' volunteer work and community involvement. By the end of the week, Wellington Academy had begun to feel like a different place. The change wasn't dramatic or revolutionary, it was subtle, genuine, and lasting. Students weren't abandoning their interests in fashion or social activities. They were simply broadening their perspectives and priorities. Local news outlets began picking up the story, not of the initial conflict, but of how one student's dignified response had catalyzed positive change in her school community. Reporter Angela Murray from the local newspaper wrote a piece titled, "Style and Substance: How One Student's Response Changed a School's Culture." The article caught the attention of neighboring schools, leading to discussions about organizing inter-school community service initiatives. What had started as a moment of mockery in a high school hallway was evolving into a broader conversation about values, priorities, and the power of individual choice. As this chapter of the story draws to a close, It's worth noting that real change often begins with small moments of courage and clarity. Usha Vance didn't set out to transform her school's culture that morning. She simply stood firm in her values and showed others a different way to measure worth. For those watching this video, think about the ripple effects of your own choices and actions. Have you ever witnessed a small moment that led to bigger changes? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let us know how you choose to make a difference in your community. 2 weeks after the incident that changed Wellington Academy, the impact of Usha Vance's response had begun to reach far beyond the school's walls. What started as a confrontation over clothing had evolved into a movement that was touching lives across the community in unexpected ways. The local community center, where Usha had been quietly volunteering for years, suddenly saw an influx of new faces. Among them was Madison Spears, who had traded her Saturday shopping routine for morning reading sessions with elementary school students. The transformation in Madison wasn't just external. The genuine smile she wore while helping a young student sound out difficult words reflected a deeper change. At the weekly Sunday community meetings held at the Vance residence, the usual attendance of 30 had swelled to over 100. The living room that had once seemed too large now barely contained the energy and enthusiasm of high school students, parents, and community members coming together to discuss local initiatives. Lauren Clark, a local business owner who had attended these meetings for years, observed the change with amazement. "I've been coming here for 5 years," she shared with the group, "but I've never seen such engagement from our young people. They're not just attending, they're leading conversations and proposing solutions." The school's original food drive, which Usha had mentioned during her hallway response, had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. What was planned as a single school initiative now involved 5 neighboring high schools, with Wellington Academy's example inspiring others to join the cause. Sarah Evans, the student body president at nearby Roosevelt High, reached out to coordinate efforts between schools. "We always saw Wellington as the wealthy school that looked down on everyone else," Sarah admitted during a joint planning meeting. But what Usha showed us is that true leadership isn't about status, it's about service. The transformation was particularly evident in Christine Thomas, who had stood alongside Madison during the initial mockery. Now, she was channeling her social media influence in a new direction. Her Instagram account, once filled with fashion hauls and party photos, began featuring stories about local charity events and community service opportunities. Her followers, initially confused by the change, started engaging with these posts in meaningful ways. Local news reporter Michael Newman, who had covered Wellington Academy's sports victories for years, found himself writing a different kind of story. His feature article, "The Quiet Revolution: How Student Leadership is Reshaping Our Community," captured attention across the state. The piece detailed how a single act of dignity in response to mockery had sparked a wider movement of youth engagement and community service. The impact reached the business community as well. Jennifer Woods, owner of a popular boutique frequented by Wellington students, noticed a shift in shopping patterns. "The girls still care about how they look," she noted, "but they're asking different questions now. They want to know where the clothes come from, who makes them, and if the companies give back to communities." This growing consciousness led to the creation of a monthly conscious commerce fair in the school gymnasium. Students like Ashley Franklin and Kevin Davis organized booths featuring local artisans, ethical fashion brands, and information about sustainable consumption. The event quickly became a community fixture, drawing visitors from neighboring towns. Principal Crawford's initial decision to turn the incident into a learning opportunity rather than a disciplinary matter was being studied by other school administrators. Dr. Rachel Anderson, superintendent of the district, began implementing similar approaches across other schools, emphasizing character development and community engagement over punitive measures. The literacy program that Usha had mentioned in her hallway speech expanded dramatically. What started with a handful of tutors helping elementary school students had grown into a comprehensive after-school program spanning multiple grade levels. Lisa Perez, a freshman who had initially joined to fulfill service hours, found herself developing a genuine passion for teaching. "I used to think success meant getting into an Ivy League school and making lots of money," Lisa shared during a tutor training session. But working with these kids has shown me that real success is about the impact you have on others. The school's atmosphere continued to evolve in subtle but significant ways. The traditional best-dressed yearbook superlative was replaced with most impactful, recognizing students who had made meaningful contributions to the community. The change, proposed by yearbook editor Michelle Hammond, was approved unanimously by the student council. Even the school's athletic programs felt the shift. Coach Robert Manning incorporated community service into team activities, having players volunteer at local youth sports programs. "We're not just building athletes," he explained during a parent meeting, "we're developing leaders who understand their role in the community." The Parents Association, led by Catherine Patterson, organized a series of workshops about conscious consumption and community engagement. These sessions, initially planned for parents, ended up attracting entire families who wanted to learn how to align their choices with their values. Local businesses began to take notice and adapt. The mall where students usually spent their weekends now hosted monthly charity drives. Store managers like Daniel Casey found that incorporating community service into their business model not only felt right but also resonated with their changing customer base. The movement sparked by Usha's response had begun to influence college applications as well. Guidance counselor Thomas Gutierrez noticed a shift in how students approached their essays. "They're writing less about achievements and more about impact," he observed. Their experiences in community service have given them authentic stories to tell. The Vance family's Sunday community meetings became a model for other neighborhoods. Families like the Wilsons and the Martinezes began hosting similar gatherings, creating a network of community engagement hubs across the city. These meetings became spaces where age and social status mattered less than ideas and willingness to contribute. During one such meeting, Brandon Palmer, the basketball team captain who had witnessed the original incident, shared a revelation. "I used to think leadership was about being in front, being seen. But Usha showed us that true leadership is about lifting others up, about creating spaces where everyone can contribute." The transformation extended to social media, where local youth influencers began shifting their content. Crystal Johnson, known for her fashion videos, started a series called Style with Substance, featuring stories of young people combining personal expression with social responsibility. The impact on Madison Spears and Christine Thomas continued to deepen. The two friends, once known primarily for their trend-setting outfits, were now recognized for their community initiatives. Madison's experience with the reading program led her to start a mentoring group for middle school girls, focusing on building confidence through contribution rather than comparison. Christine, drawing on her social media expertise, developed a platform connecting students with local volunteer opportunities. Filter Your Focus became a popular app among teenagers in the area, making it easier for young people to find meaningful ways to engage with their communities. The local government took notice of the youth-led transformation. City Council member Patricia Vincent invited student representatives to participate in community planning sessions. Usha, who attended these meetings not as a leader but as one voice among many, demonstrated the same quiet dignity that had sparked the initial change. The story reached state education officials, who began studying the Wellington model of student-led community engagement. What made this model unique was its organic growth from a moment of potential conflict into a sustainable movement for positive change. As winter approached, the food drive that had been mentioned in Usha's hallway speech exceeded all expectations. The initial goal of feeding 50 families grew to supporting over 300 households. The logistics of this expanded initiative created opportunities for students to develop real-world planning and organization skills. The most profound changes were often the quietest ones. In the school cafeteria, where social hierarchies had once been strictly maintained, students now grouped themselves around shared interests and projects rather than status symbols. Conversations about weekend plans increasingly included volunteer activities alongside social events. The transformation wasn't about rejecting style or personal expression, it was about expanding the definition of what mattered. Students like Emma Robinson and Tyler Cooper found ways to combine their interest in fashion with their growing commitment to community service, organizing clothing drives that emphasized both style and sustainability. As this chapter of the story demonstrates, real change often spreads in ways we can't predict. What began as one student's dignified response to mockery had evolved into a community-wide movement that was changing how young people viewed themselves and their role in society. For those watching this video, consider the ripple effects of your own actions. How might your response to a challenging situation influence others? What kind of change could you inspire in your community? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and let us know about positive changes you've witnessed or created in your own environment. 6 months after the morning when Usha Vance turned mockery into a moment of transformation, Wellington Academy and its surrounding community had undergone changes that no one could have predicted. This final chapter reveals how a single act of dignity created a lasting legacy that would influence generations to come. The spring sunshine illuminated the school's main hallway, the same corridor where the incident had taken place. Now, instead of designer bags lining the lockers, there was a wall of recognition celebrating student-led community initiatives. Photos and stories documented the growing impact of what had become known as the Wellington Way. Madison Spears stood before this wall, adjusting a new photo of her reading program's latest graduation ceremony. The image showed her surrounded by beaming elementary school students, each holding certificates of reading achievement. Her designer clothes were still stylish, but now they were simply part of who she was, not the defining feature of her identity. "Sometimes I look at these pictures and barely recognize myself," Madison shared with Sarah Morgan, who was updating the volunteer schedule nearby. "But then I realize I'm actually seeing myself clearly for the first time." This kind of reflection had become common among students who had witnessed or participated in the original incident. The transformation had caught the attention of educational researchers. Dr. Elizabeth Lawrence from the State University's Department of Education spent a semester studying what she called the Vance effect, how one student's response to mockery had catalyzed sustainable social change within a school community. What makes this case unique, Dr. Lawrence noted in her preliminary findings, is how the change has been embedded into the school's culture. It's not just about programs or initiatives, it's about a fundamental shift in how students view themselves and their role in society. The impact on college admissions was becoming clear. Wellington Academy's graduating class had received unprecedented recognition not for their test scores or athletic achievements, but for their community engagement. Universities were specifically citing the students' involvement in initiatives that had grown from Usha's influence. Christine Thomas, who had stood alongside Madison during the initial mockery, was now preparing to attend a prestigious university, not because of her family's connections, but because of her innovative work in developing digital platforms for community engagement. Her Filter Your Focus app had been adopted by schools across the state. The Sunday community meetings at the Vance residence had evolved into a regional model for youth-led community development. Delegations from other cities regularly attended to learn how to implement similar programs in their communities. Michael Crawford, still serving as Wellington's principal, often remarked that these meetings had taught him more about education than his graduate studies. The school's culture had shifted so profoundly that new students quickly absorbed its values. Emma Baldwin, a freshman who transferred mid-year, observed, "At my old school, everyone was focused on having the right clothes and sitting at the right lunch table. Here, people care more about what you're doing to make a difference." The food drive that Usha had mentioned in her hallway speech had transformed into a year-round operation. Under the leadership of Christopher Smith and Rachel Rodriguez, it now supported over 500 families and had partnerships with local businesses and farms to ensure sustainable support for the community. Local business owner Thomas Gutierrez had transformed his clothing store into a model of conscious commerce. "We still sell fashion," he explained, "but now every purchase supports local initiatives. Our customers don't just buy clothes, they invest in their community." The literacy program had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a small tutoring initiative now operated in every elementary school in the district. Jennifer Henderson, who had been one of the first to join after witnessing Usha's response, was now training new tutors and developing curriculum materials. The impact on Wellington's athletic programs continued to deepen. Coach Brandon Palmer had integrated community service into team training, finding that it improved not just character but also performance. When players understand they're part of something bigger than themselves, he observed, they play with more purpose. The school's social media presence had evolved into a platform for positive change. The once popular fashion and party posts had been replaced by stories of impact and engagement. Student social media coordinator Ashley Franklin noted that engagement actually increased when they shifted their focus to community initiatives. Madison and Christine's transformation had perhaps been the most profound. The two friends, once known primarily for their judgment of others, had become mentors to younger students, helping them navigate the challenges of peer pressure and social expectations. "We don't pretend we were never that way," Madison explained during a freshman orientation session. "We use our experience to help others understand that it's never too late to change your perspective and priorities." The worn sweater that had sparked the initial mockery had become a symbol of authentic leadership. Usha still wore it occasionally, not as a statement but as a comfortable reminder of her father's wisdom. New students would hear the story and understand that true character often comes wrapped in unexpected packages. The school's annual fashion show had been reimagined as a style with substance event, featuring ethical fashion brands and highlighting students' community work alongside their personal style. The event, organized by Victoria Horton and Catherine Chen, drew attention from fashion industry professionals interested in the intersection of style and social responsibility. The Parents Association, under the leadership of Rebecca Watson, had developed a comprehensive program helping families navigate conversations about values, consumption, and community engagement. Their workshop series, Beyond the Brand, was being adopted by other schools across the state. Local government had taken notice of the youth-led transformation. City council meetings now regularly included student representatives, ensuring that young voices were part of community planning discussions. The Wellington model of student engagement was being studied by urban planners and community developers. Usha's approach to leadership continued to influence how students viewed success. Rather than seeking attention or recognition, many students had adopted her quiet, impact-focused approach. As senior Jessica Harvey noted, "We learned that true influence doesn't come from being the loudest voice, but from being the most consistent in your values." The school's career counseling program, led by Michelle Edwards, had evolved to include discussions about social impact alongside traditional career planning. Students were increasingly seeking opportunities that allowed them to combine professional success with community contribution. The transformation had even influenced the local economy. New businesses were opening with community impact built into their models. The mall where students once spent hours shopping had been partially converted into a community center, hosting educational programs and social enterprises. As graduation approached for the senior class, the legacy of that hallway moment was evident in the plans students were making for their futures. College essays reflected genuine engagement with community issues rather than carefully crafted achievement lists. The annual yearbook, traditionally filled with fashion poses and social highlights, now documented the various ways students had contributed to their community. Editor Sarah Morgan had created a new section called Moments of Impact, celebrating instances where students had chosen character over conformity. Local media continued to follow the story, but their focus had shifted from the initial incident to the sustainable changes it had inspired. Reporter Michael Newman's follow-up series, Generation Impact, documented how young people were reshaping their community's social fabric. The school district had incorporated lessons from Wellington's transformation into its strategic planning. Superintendent Rachel Anderson worked with other schools to implement programs that emphasized character development and community engagement alongside academic achievement. As this chapter draws to a close, it's worth noting that the most significant changes weren't the visible programs or initiatives, but the shift in how students viewed themselves and their role in society. The question was no longer about wearing the right clothes or fitting in with the right crowd, it was about making the right impact. Usha Vance's response to mockery had done more than just silence a room, it had awakened a generation to their potential for positive change. Her quiet dignity had demonstrated that true influence doesn't come from what you wear or how you look, but from how you choose to respond to challenges and how you serve others. For those watching this video, Consider your own opportunities to transform moments of conflict into catalysts for positive change. How might your response to challenges influence others? What legacy could you create in your community? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below, and let us know how you're choosing to make a difference in your world. Remember, it's not about the clothes we wear or the status we hold, it's about the impact we choose to make and the values we choose to uphold. Like this video if you believe in the power of dignified responses to create lasting change, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and transform.